Well, some of you may recall and may have even participated in the old tradition of being carried across the threshold on your wedding day. Oh, there we go. I used to see this in the movies, and I thought it was the most romantic thing ever. The bride, so dainty, always dainty, being swept up in her husband's strong arms and borne safely across the boundary of their new home. I don't know if anybody does that anymore. Of course, we don't have just brides and grooms. We have grooms and brides and brides. And I learned later, this is more of a reason to not do it, that this custom originated back in antiquity as a reenactment of marriage by capture. When, seriously, like the rape of the Sabine women, where, girls and women were kidnapped and forced to marry the men who grabbed them. I mean, we know this still happens. So I don't know how it evolved into this cute custom, but it started way back in Roman times. Well, I prefer the interpretation of that custom that honors the old belief that thresholds are thin places. That is, places where the spirit world and the material world that we can see and feel intermingle, and mischievous or troublesome entities can, in those places, kind of break through to our world, and sometimes with negative consequences. So in this interpretation, one of the couple lifts the other's feet over the threshold to protect them from any negative forces. So that's a lot nicer than the other interpretation. A threshold is what we call a liminal space. This is Jerusalem. An in-between place, and therefore a place of possibility and danger. Something's not quite happened yet. 1 foot in one world, 1 foot on the way out. Something coming in might be good, might be most unwelcome. Something going out, exploring, or escaping. Liminal spaces. A new year is a threshold. Westerners see it as a fresh start, a bold charge to go forth on that straight path into the future. Do better, improve, make resolutions, do your Marie Kondo uncluttering. Has anybody been watching that? Yeah. You doing okay with it? She's like the high priestess of uncluttering and simplifying your space. And her big mantra is, hold on to absolutely everything that you own and see if it brings you joy. Hold on to it. If it doesn't, let it go. So I got rid of some things that weren't bringing me joy in my refrigerator yesterday. And I also culled about 30 books from my library. But we can also see the new year as the starting point of a circle. January's namesake being the two-faced Roman god Janus, the god of endings and beginnings, of thresholds, doorways, crossroads, one face that looks back and one that faces forward. I love this image as it reminds me to honor who I have been, what I've seen and experienced, as I move into what will be. In other words, Janus reminds us that the path is not always inexorably forever forward. The soul needs its retreats as well as its advances. If the past has been painful or full of failure, the image of Janus bears witness to our ability to integrate all of that painful stuff with our hopes and dreams for the future. It says, you don't have to disown and amputate any part of yourself or your experience to embrace a freshness of possibility. It's rich material for what you will bring with you. The open door swings both ways. You go out, you go back in. We move forward with a new vision of what is possible, but we take memory and hindsight with us. The fact is that there is no perfectly straight path ahead for anyone or any community. There are always detours. There are always crossroads and excursions off the beaten path, what the poet Robert Frost called the road less traveled. But all who set out on a journey or who are cast out on one fare much better on that winding path when they have a solid place from which they have started, a location that has grounded them in their selfhood and in their community ethos. Every church that has ever been constructed with integrity was meant to be such a locus, such a place, whether a lofty cathedral or a simple, unadorned New England clapboard meeting house. The house of God, the church is sometimes called, as the people who gather therein invoke the holy presence, which they know is not located literally within the walls of the building. Nevertheless, houses of worship have always been consciously or unconsciously understood by the larger community as being places that are charged with spiritual power and perhaps protected by resident deities, which is why houses of worship has been revered as sanctuaries and respected as sanctuaries throughout many, many, many centuries, but also targeted for vandalism and destruction. On January 7th, in 1976, the Unitarian Universalist Church in Lynn, that had been built in 1873, burned to the ground. It was a 6-alarm fire, and obviously a deeply traumatic event for the community. So much was lost. Will Boynton, who's here this morning, was the congregation's president at that time, and the Reverend Bob Slater was the minister. Ray King and Nelson Darling and Fred Clapp, and I'm sure others who are here today, were on the building committee that led the process to rebuild the church here in Swampscott, in this location, a contemporary building by architect Paul Sun. So much was lost, yes, but the spiritual grounding the congregation had cultivated within the walls of those original churches, the Universalist Church in Lynn, the Unitarian Church in Lynn, which had merged with it, and that chapel in the Universalist chapel in Swampscott, as well as the strength that they gathered from the faith communities that hosted and sheltered them during those years that the congregation was like a turtle without its shell, was a good and solid foundation. And in 1983, the congregation, known as UUCGL, was able to walk across the threshold into its new building. And here we are today. And I want to all, in this right now, lift up the church history ministry team that is meeting all the time, like twice a week and on the weekends, and are putting together, we have all these archives that really hadn't been organized and examined, and they've been down in the basement for a really long time. And so this amazing team is going through all that material with your white archival gloves on, right, you guys, and sifting through it, and they're recovering records and all kinds of things. Some of the things that they have found you can see on display in the hallways there, inside the display cases that for the fellowship room. But I'm really looking forward to the church history ministry teams sharing with us more of what they've found in the near future. In 2019, we are well past the trauma of the fire that destroyed the church on Nahant Street. So much so that we are considering now new and bold uses of our building. We have been safe and comfortable here for 36 years. Now we are considering how we are called not just to be comfortable, but to harness some of the sacred power of the church on behalf of the vulnerable and persecuted. As the world around us displays more and more disregard for the sanctity of the earth, of human life, of families, of the ancient call to love one another and to consider all people neighbors, and to welcome the stranger, it is right and good that we should consider ourselves not only emissaries of decency as people in the world, but to reconsider the uses of our building to do the same. And that is what our exploration of sanctuary is all about. And I'm going to put in a pitch for everyone to attend the January 13th continued learning opportunity after church next weekend. When we honor the gods of a place, as well as the people who live or gather in that place, we step over a threshold or a boundary with special intention and respect, sometimes with ritual gifts, such as flowers or a bottle of wine, sometimes with actions, like taking our shoes off at the door or genuflecting in the entrance, or as Jewish people do, touching the mezuzah in the doorway and then touching our lips. I want to ask all of you, when you walk over the threshold of this church building, what do you do? One of the things that I do most Sunday mornings, I just started doing it this year, is to turn on that little battery-operated candle in the foyer. And any of you can actually do this, and I encourage you to do it. It's just on the little chalice. It's actually, I'm blocking it in this picture. But you just have to flip a switch on the bottom of it. Just sort of lights the little hearth flame. Many of you head for the coat closets, and then to the name tags. This is a ritualistic way of entering the covenantal expectations of community. It publicly announces your willingness to know and to be known. Look at these two good doobies wearing their name tags. We gather in the sanctuary or in meeting rooms where we often have a customary chair that we sit in, folders or notes pertaining to our role in the community, choir singer, board member, fellowship hour coordinator. And you will see as people gather in the sanctuary that often you'll beeline for the same exact seats. It just grounds you in some way. So we come together, and then we don't merely leave, but we are sent forth from our gatherings. This implies two things. It implies first that we should have come in prepared to be transformed in some way, maybe given a renewed charge to orient ourselves or to live with more awareness of some kind of quality that we want to manifest. But the second implication is that we are being sent forth as boomerangs because we need to come back. It is hoped that we will return. Think of the traditional blessing, the traditional benediction words from Psalm 128. And you've probably heard this many, many times as a benediction if you are in any way a churchgoer, or if you've attended synagogue services, temple services. May the Lord, it's from the Psalms, so Jewish and Christian scripture. May the Lord bless your going out and your coming in from this day forward until we meet again. When we go back out across the threshold, it is not permanently, and I think that we don't emphasize this enough. The building does not have a big magnet in the middle of the courtyard that will irresistibly draw any of us back. It's the community that needs to make it clear that we want to be the magnet, that our vision, our shared vision is the magnet. The shared transformation is the magnet that should pull us back across that threshold, not to just get our needs met or to have a happy experience, but also to be wrapped into that greater commanding spirit whose reality we affirm and encounter here. This is why when we have been developing what we're calling the cornerstones and guidelines for our home-based programming, I wanted to make explicit that every programming and gathering we host here should include an invitation to return, so that we say, thank you for coming, and please join us for the next thing, which we will be doing on this and such date. And I really encourage all of you to be part of that boomerang spirit, that when you're gathered together, wherever you are, you say, it's good to see you, and I hope you personally will come back for this and such, and we'll sit together at worship, or we'll share the potluck meal, or we'll go together to that learning opportunity. We all know that a church is not its building. The church is a people who are sharing in this lifetime a calling to do some kind of ministry in the community and in the world. But we do have this beautiful building in this peaceful, tranquil, and lovely location, and we have a new year ahead of us. As our hymn says, stand we now upon the threshold, facing futures yet unknown. This congregation survived a fire in 1976. In 2019, I hope we will use our experience as a people who can rise from the ashes to provide not only a warm hearth fire for seekers and members and their children, but to light a flame of passion for justice among all those who cross our threshold. So may it be.